we hear the truth that there are no jobs available. That's the truth that we hear. I will tell you that I had 8 job fairs in the 2nd District of New Mexico in the last 2 years. The least number of jobs we had in a day were 400, and we had up to 3,000 jobs every single job fair. And I'll tell you that we probably didn't fill 10 spots on any one of the job fairs. It was free, it was open to the public, we advertised it well. The reason I had the job fairs is I was hearing everybody say, well, there's no jobs. And then on the other hand, I was seeing employers say, we have no people. We can't hire anyone. No one will come to work. They can't pass a drug screen, and they won't come off of government assistance. And so we began to have the job fairs to point that out. We can't get in it today, but because I'm going to talk about the finances, we can do a little bit about that. But at some point, we must come together with the destruction of the value system in this country. The value system that would have people in this state not move to the southeast corner. People who are struggling to make it. Do you know how much a truck driver without a college education, without a GED, is making in the southeast part of the state? And you're hearing like I am, there are no jobs? And I talked to a truck driver owner last night, a trucking owner. They're paying $300 a day, $80,000 to $120,000 a year for truck drivers, and they can't get people to come take the jobs because the people would rather stay on the government assistance. My friends, we have a breakdown in the family and our value system that you and I both are going to get washed under. These are not Democrat, Republican things. These are things that tell us what is truth, and the truth is that we see decay throughout. And we can solve it, but we must get about solving it. The inflation, the first 100 years that this country was in existence, what you could buy for $1 the day George Washington was sworn in, 100 years later, you could buy for 57 cents. That's what happens when you have a stable currency. You get better at producing, you become competitors, better transportation. So what you would spend $1 for, later you spend 57 cents, and that's where the poor people, they're lifted up. They can have more power. They have more purchasing power. Now, the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and look at what has happened since that point. In 100 years, the first 100 went from $1 down to 57 cents. So you have more purchasing power. Since the 100 years since the Federal Reserve, what $1 bought in 1913, in 2013 takes $24 to buy. And so these ideas that we can continue this without devastating the poor and middle class are simply not ideas that we can live with. Jobs, we read the Constitution on the floor of the House of Representatives just this week. And to my luck, I got amendment number 10. That's the one that says that every power not completely and put into writing given to the federal government stays with the state government or the people themselves, is what it says. The government in Washington should be small power. We should be the weak government. And instead, I see it being the strong government. You should be the strongest power in New Mexico here in this body. But instead, I see a government has driven out the apple production that used to be here. G.X. McSherry used to sit right over here, plowed up his apple orchard because our trade representatives in Washington would not hold the Chinese feet to the fire on the currency, and they were allowed to manipulate the currency, get unfair advantage. And so we don't grow apples in New Mexico. We used to have sheep in New Mexico, and now we have none because they couldn't protect the herds against the predators. We have people in Washington describing values for here that are taking away our job base, our revenue base. Now, you saw us get into a big fight about the lizard in the southeast part of the state. Why should Albuquerque be concerned with this lizard fight? Because if we in the oil and gas business don't pay our taxes, if they shut those jobs down, you in Albuquerque are going to have to pay the taxes that we can't. We are a small economy. We need to protect every single bit of it. I've got a chart here that's very instructive. This is public ownership of lands. The red is the federal government. You don't have to get much from it. It's the next chart that I want you to look at and see the correlation between this chart The red states are the ones that spend less on education. You wonder why our education system is hurting, and there's a correlation between the public ownership of lands. You can't have a tax base when you have that much federal ownership, and it takes away. So Yvette Harrell is going to have a bill, and I think several of the Democrats are going to sign on, because it's, again, not a Republican Democrat. This is education dollars that are going to a federal government that should be coming here. So maybe you don't like the bill, but the truth is we can't keep going the same way that we've been going. Not on the debt, the deficit, or anything else. I'm asking that we all throw down these political weapons. We've got plenty of room to disagree. There's going to be plenty of issues that we can whack each other on daily. But as far as our financial future, I'm saying that we should come together as parties and have our differences of opinion, but work them out at a table. What would that working out look like? Michael Capuano tells me, he sits on the Financial Services Committee with him, and we dust it up frequently. He's scrappy. He came from a very poor home, the same as I did. Massachusetts liberal. I'm not the most conservative member of the House, but I'm on the scale somewhere up there. And we dusted it up one day, and I finally walked over to Michael, just, in the middle of the committee meeting. I said, Mike, I don't know why I do this. I said, I respect you probably more than anybody on your side. You know what you're talking about. And I get out, let's go to dinner off the campus, man. I said, we can't just keep doing this. He said, okay, and we went to dinner, and I said, we need to work together. And he said, what would you work on? I said, I don't know, you go first. And he said, you wouldn't do it. I said, corporate taxes. And I said, I'll work on that with you. I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to take away the write-offs, the skyboxes for corporations. I said, I'll do that. I have no problem with that. I want to do this and this. I said, I'll do those. He said, well, then what do you want? I said, just a lower rate. He said, we're driving our businesses overseas. We're giving away jobs because of the rate of taxes. He said, I agree. He said, I was a tax lawyer. He said, we should go to zero for corporations, really. But he said, we can't sell that publicly. But 15 or 16, that's what they pay in other countries. And if we went to 15 or 16, the manufacturing jobs would come flooding back here. Look at Ireland's history about 15 years ago. They lowered the tax rate to 12. They were at 36. We were at 40. They were at 36. They went to 12. Created the Irish miracle. Companies began to pour into Ireland. My brother-in-law worked for Hughes Tool, went at that same time and built a bit manufacturing facility in Ireland. The sadness is that Ireland began to feel prosperity and began to do what we're doing in our budget and began to squeeze more money out. And the Irish miracle has dried up. And my brother-in-law went last year and dismantled the last of the 5 Hughes Tool bit companies. That's what happens. So Mike Capuano and I are working to try to see if we can come up with it. He said, you might agree, but your corporate buddies wouldn't. I said, you pick the industry, and I'll bring them to dinner, and we'll see. I won't tell them anything about what we're talking about. He said, oil and gas, I hate them. Okay. So we got oil and gas people come to dinner. Mike says, I want to get rid of this. They said, we'd agree to that. He said, you would? I said, Mike, what is it that you want? He said, I just want the money to do my liberal programs. I said, what if we have a hinge? The companies that create jobs, we lower the tax rate. The ones that don't create jobs, we don't lower the tax rate. He said, I believe we could go for that. That's what it's going to look like, you and I working together across the aisle. And we haven't done that in the recent past. When Republicans talk about Democrats, we describe you as the enemy. And Democrats describe us as the enemy. My friends, about 5 years ago, I began to see with clearness that this is the enemy. You're not the enemy. We're architects who would design a house differently. And I might not want a house that's designed the way you do, but I believe in my heart that you want the same thing from this great nation that I do. But if we don't start coming together, we're going to continue to run each other down. Just came back from a 29,000-mile trip around the globe, visiting some of the poorest countries in the world. China is everywhere. China is everywhere, while you and I are discussing and crabbing about this policy or that policy. My friends, it's time for us to ask, what is truth? The truth is we cannot sustain what we're doing. If you have that's the truth as I understand it. If you have a different truth, I'll listen to you as long as you've listened to me. And hopefully it ends soon, the speaker said. But these times are unprecedented in risk for the nation. We'll tell you that the last thing that I would point out is this chart, right up in this upper right-hand corner. That came from the OMB. That's the White House economist. CBO had one that looked exactly the same. That chart is very instructive. What it does is describe the per capita income through the years. So it tells us it's increasing. And it tells us what we intuitively know, that we made better money than our parents made. But you see it flatten out and start down. That tells us what the answer to every town hall I ask, are your kids going to have a better lifestyle than you? And almost everybody says no, they're not. But the alarming thing is that the chart stops in 2038. Now, charts don't stop, time doesn't stop. And so I began to ask economists, well, why does that graph stop? They said that's where the U.S. economy fails, 2038. OMB, White House, CBO, Congress, both are saying that we're in a game that will not continue. I believe with all my heart that you and I can work these problems out. I've got on my web page right now $1 trillion worth of cuts. $1 trillion worth of cuts that don't affect any of the programs that we all want. We don't want to take money away from people who desperately need it. One is fraud to Medicare, $100 billion a year. That would take this 1.1 down to 1.0. $100 billion in fraud. That's where people sell stuff. The guy was on 60 Minutes. Yeah, I made $400,000 a month selling stuff I didn't have to Medicare. And we can't check up closely enough to see it. I think we can fix that problem. That would be one. Another, duplication. 123 agencies deal with childhood nutrition. Now I want childhood nutrition, but I don't need 123 agencies to do it. Duplication would take this number down then to 0.8. And so on our webpage, we've got $1 trillion worth of these, and I just let people vote on them. Would you do it? Would you not do it? Form your own list, because we've got to cure this problem. But then creation of jobs, we lower the tax rate to corporations, begin to attract them back in. We ran them out with higher taxes. President Obama, by the way, in the last 2 states of the Union has said the same thing. So we agree the fixes are close and we simply need to do it. If we do not do it, there are deep penalties to pay. We'll slug along. We'll look like Argentina. We'll have inflation of 1,500% or whatever. But my friends, that's not the lifestyle that you and I wanted to pass along to our children. I'm asking you, with all of my belief, that I think that we can come together. I believe that the American people have already come together. I see them. I'm out in town halls constantly, and the people are saying, yes, we're ready to work across the aisle. The people are ready. Now then, we as leaders need to do the same thing. And when we do that, I will guarantee you the job base is going to skyrocket. There's a pent-up demand for economic growth in this country. Other nations need for us to be strong and healthy, because the world economy pivots off of us. If we fail, they fail. If we succeed, they succeed. The nation needs it. All it requires is you and I setting aside partisan differences and working for the future that I think we all want. God bless you. Thank you very much.